I am the sun of wisdom and the ocean of knowledge. I cheer the faint and revive the dead. I am the guiding light that illumineth the way. I am the royal falcon on the arm of the Almighty. I unfold the drooping wings of every broken bird and start it on its flight. Bahá'u'lláh. The ancient beauty hath consented to be bound with chains that mankind may be released from its bondage, and hath accepted to be made a prisoner within this most mighty stronghold, that the whole world may attain unto true liberty. He hath drained to its dregs the cup of sorrow, that all the peoples of the earth may attain unto abiding joy, and be filled with gladness. This is of the mercy of your Lord, the compassionate, the most merciful. We have accepted to be abased, O believers in the unity of God, that ye may be exalted, and have suffered manifold afflictions, that ye may prosper and flourish. Bahá'u'lláh.
Right. Well, it's lovely to be with you. And as was mentioned, this sort of follows on a bit from for those of you who were here last week, from Carolyn's talk about Adventism and the expectation of the return of Christ, most strongly in America, but also all around the world. And so this is to take a look at who is Baha'u'lláh in relation to Christ. So I want to actually start by looking at some of the things that the Baha'i writings say about Jesus, so that we have an idea of the position of Baha'is in relation to Jesus. And so I'd better do my screen sharing. And there we are. So the relationship between Jesus and Baha'u'lláh. Now, this is a statement by Abdul-Baha, the son of Baha'u'lláh. If you reflect upon the essential teachings of Jesus, you will realize that they are the light of the world. Nobody can question their truth. They are the very source of life and the cause of happiness to the human race. Then there's this, also by Abdul-Baha, this reference to the greatness of Christ. The honor and greatness of Christ is not due to the fact that he didn't have a human father, but to his perfections, bounties, and divine glory. If the greatness of Christ is his being fatherless, then Adam is greater than Christ, for he had neither father nor mother. I can't help thinking that Abdul-Baha may have been smiling when he wrote that. The splendor and honor of the holy souls and the divine manifestations come from their heavenly perfections, bounties, and glory, and from nothing else. Right. Carolyn, could you read this?
Know thou that when the Son of Man yielded up his breath to God, the whole creation wept with a great weeping. By sacrificing himself, however, a fresh capacity was infused into all created things. Its evidences, as witnessed in all the peoples of the earth, are now manifest before thee. The deepest wisdom which the sages have uttered, the profoundest learning which any mind hath unfolded, the arts which the ablest hands have produced, the influence exerted by the most potent of rulers, are but manifestations of the quickening power released by his transcendent, his all-pervasive and resplendent spirit. We testify that when he came into the world, He shed the splendor of his glory upon all created things. Through him, the leper recovered from the leprosy of perversity and ignorance. Through him, the unchaste and wayward were healed.
So following on from what we read in the previous slide, where Abdul-Baha says that it's not, that it's the perfections, spiritual perfections, and that Jesus had and brought that make him great. And this last bit, through him the leper recovered from the leprosy of perversity and ignorance, through him the unchaste and wayward were healed. So in a way, this is, sorry, that's too quick. In a way, that's the greatest of his miracles, because curing a leper, physically a leper, is wonderful, but he's going to die after that and sometime. But curing people of perversity and ignorance is quite another matter, and that's continued to happen right up to now. And through him, the unchaste and wayward are healed. Again, he heals somebody who's blind, but it's a temporary thing for one person. But this healing is of thousands and thousands of people, millions. So it continues, through his power, born of Almighty God, the eyes of the blind were opened and the soul of the sinner sanctified. Leprosy may be interpreted as any veil that interveneth between man and the recognition of the Lord his God. Whoso alloweth himself to be shut out from him is indeed a leper, who shall not be remembered in the kingdom of God, the mighty, the all-praised. We bear witness that through the power of the word of God, every leper was cleansed, every sickness was healed, every human infirmity was banished. He it is who purifies the world. Blessed is the man who, with a face beaming with light, hath turned towards him. So these are tributes to Jesus, but at the same time, they're indications of where Bahá'u'lláh puts the emphasis on the greatness of Jesus. Now, I thought at this point, we would look at some of the things that the Bible gives of Jesus, which helps us to understand the approach of the Baha'is. Now, this is from the Old Testament. The Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. Now, this is Moses talking, and it's actually the only prophecy from Moses concerning the coming of the Messiah. And he describes him as a prophet like unto me. Now, when we come to the New Testament, Jesus said, "For had you believed in Moses, you would have believed in me." So if you could understand Moses, you'd understand me, for he wrote of me. But if you believe not his writings, how shall you believe my words? I can of mine own self do nothing, not mine own will, but the will of the Father which has sent me. So if we just go back for a moment to this business of Moses, he seems to be saying that, he's recognizing that Moses was a divine messenger. And you say, if you really understood him, you would understand me. So there is an equivalence there. So we'll look a bit more at his relationship with God. So this first one, I can of mine own self do nothing, not my own will, but the will of the Father which has sent me. And again, I do nothing of myself, but as my Father taught me, I speak these things. So there's like the obedient son and his total submission to God. Carolyn, can you read the next few?
And he who sees me sees him who sent me.
Now, there's what I think is a very helpful image in the Baha'i writings that explains that what Baha'is call the divine manifestations, the manifestations, the ones who are channels for God's message, who are the intermediaries between God and man, likens them to a perfect mirror, and God as the sun. Some of you will be familiar with this. And so he says, you know, the sun doesn't descend to the earth. That would be disastrous. But is reflected in the mirror, in a perfect mirror. So when we look into that mirror, we see the sun. So this is, he who sees me sees him who sent me. I think, personally, I find that explanation fits with this saying of Jesus.
For there is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man, Christ Jesus.
So here, Jesus is being referred to as a mediator or an intermediary between God and man.
I am going to the Father, for my Father is greater than I.
So, yes, I mean, to know him is to know God, but the Father is greater.
No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him.
An interesting expression, he's declared him. I would imagine it means much like he has manifested him or declared his will, told us a bit more about him. But again, it's sort of like this idea of a divine intermediary chosen by God. Now, we're concerned with Jesus's promise that he would return in the latter days. And so let's have a bit of a look at this. Now, it's funny, it seems to have sort of escaped people's notice in the Christian world to some extent, at least as far as I'm aware, that Jesus actually explains what the return of a prophet means. So let's have a look at that. There was the expectation that Elijah would return before the Messiah. Now, this is words attributed to Jesus. Among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist, for all the prophets of the law prophesied until John. And if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come. He who has ears, let him hear. So he who has ears, let him hear. It requires a spiritual perception to understand it, because the disciples were asking him about it and they hadn't, it wasn't clear to them at that time. Then I think this was when he was coming down from the Transfiguration on the Mount, and they asked him again about this. Why then do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? And Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah comes. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they didn't recognize him, but have done to him everything that they wished. You remember that he was killed. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. So Jesus is prophesying that the same sort of thing will happen to him. The disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. Now, before we do that, right, we'll just go back to that. But in Revelations, in the New Testament, the last book of the New Testament, it talks about Jesus's new name, that he will have a new name when he returns. And I mean, we've just seen Jesus's explanation of the return of Elijah, and it's quite clear that that John the Baptist wasn't called Elijah. And in fact, when the Pharisees and scribes and so on came and asked him, are you the Messiah? And he said, no. Are you Elijah? And he said, no. So physically he wasn't, and said so himself. But Jesus said, if you've got ears to hear, he was. So it's obviously a spiritual reality. It's the return, I would put it, that it's the return of the same prophetic role as Elijah. So this might well be important when we come to look at what does it mean, the return of Christ. Now, when Bahá'u'lláh came, he was preceded, as Carolyn mentioned, by the Bab, a young man. And in Bahá'u'llah's letter to the Pope of the time, Pope Pius IX, he said, O followers of the Son, that's the Christians, obviously, we have once again sent John unto you, and he verily hath cried out in the wilderness of the Bayan. Now the Bayan was the book, the holy book of the Bab. In fact, sometimes it's used to just refer to the whole of his revelation. So he's saying that actually the Bab is like the return of John the Baptist to announce Bahá'u'llah's coming. At the same time, it's very intriguing because probably the story of the Bab has got so many parallels and very close to the story of Jesus. His very short mission, Jesus, 3 years, the Bab, 6 years, and the whole story of his execution and the disciple who died with him, and so many things. So it's interesting, in another book called The Book of Certitude, Bahá'u'lláh says that these manifestations of God, they speak on different levels at different times. So in one, they may say, you know, I'm nothing and I'm just a servant, or I'm a prophet, or to know me is to know God, or I am the Word of God made flesh. And so in one way, we could say that, oh yes, he goes on to say that every prophet can be considered as the return of one of the previous ones. If you said that, it would be true. But at the same time, they're different. So again, in his letter to the Pope, he said, "O followers of the gospel, prepare the way. The day of the advent of the glorious Lord is at hand. Make ready to enter the kingdom." Now, yes, there's an interesting bit with the where he talks about being the shepherd. Could you read that, Carolyn?
I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me.
Right. So he's the good shepherd, and he knows his sheep, and his sheep know him. So obviously these sheep are his believers. They are the Christians at the time. So they're all part of his flock. But he goes on.
I have other sheep that are not of this flock. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd.
Right. So, as we know, Jesus said that there were many things that he could tell people, but they weren't ready. They couldn't bear it at the time. So here he seems to be talking about that future. And who are these sheep are not of his flock? Now, he's defined his flock as the Christians, my sheep and my sheep know me. So in the light of the Baha'i teachings, we might invite Christians to consider that the other sheep that are not of this flock are the peoples of the other faiths of the world, who will all be brought together when Christ returns. And there will be one flock and one shepherd. So it's an interesting way to think about it. Now, we're now thinking not about the Ba, but about Bahá'u'lláh. Can you carry on reading, Carolyn?
Christ's return. For the Son of Man shall come. Sorry, my internet is unstable. For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father, coming in a cloud with power and great glory.
Right. Now, I think we should remember that the Jewish religious leaders obviously knew their scriptures extremely well, and they had what they thought was a clear picture of what they meant. And when Jesus came, he really indicated that to quite an extent, they hadn't understood properly. And they meant something because he didn't fulfill the prophecies in the literal way that they were expecting. So coming in a cloud with power and great glory, Baha'is would say shouldn't be taken literally. Then there's a quote from Matthew, Carolyn.
At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth shall mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other.
Well, gathering his elect from the four winds from one end of the heavens to the other could be taken as meaning peoples from all over the world. So it's not surprising when we come to Bahá'u'lláh that he says, you know, the time has come for all the peoples of the world to come together as one people, one family. And these images about the clouds of heaven and so on come from the Old Testament, from Daniel. Could you just read that as well?
In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, this kingdom that will never be destroyed is something that, as Baha'is we would say, has been progressively revealed. You remember that Jesus said that my kingdom is not of this world. So he was telling people about the spiritual kingdom which we go on to. But he also left a prayer. And we're all familiar with the Lord's Prayer. And there's this bit in it: thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, we haven't yet had a world, and it looks a very difficult task just at this particular moment with all that's going on. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, Abdul-Baha, the son of Bahá'u'lláh, made a very interesting comment about this. He said, this is not just a prayer, it's a promise. Because Jesus would not have asked his followers to pray for God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven if it wasn't possible. So it is a promise that the time will come when humanity will progress sufficiently to be able to say that they're, as a whole, trying to carry out his will on earth as it is in heaven. Of course, that is precisely what Baha'u'llah's mission is. Now, let's have a look what Baha'u'lláh says. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security, are unattainable unless or until its unity is firmly established. I mean, this is so relevant to what we're going through at the moment, isn't it? We haven't got that unity that can assure peace and security. We've got to have unity first. So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. And then he advises us, be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. So these words of Baha'u'lláh indicate that he's really addressing a different stage in the development of human society, at which we're just at the beginning. But it's a fantastic vision, which we need so badly. Now, there's so much that I could say, but I haven't got time to say. So I'll just refer you to the book that was mentioned. This is the Kindle version on Amazon, Reflection on Baha'u'llah's Letter to the Christians, which is, it's a letter, or a tablet as the Baha'is call it, but it's a letter to what was very almost certainly the first Christian to become a Baha'i. But it's not just to him. Through this letter, he addresses the whole of the Christian world. So I thought it was very important that the Christian world could have a look at it, and also that it would be helpful to have some light shone on the things that he says in the light of other things that Baha'u'lláh has said and Abdu'l-Baha has explained. So that is available on Kindle. And since I'm not going to be able to go through all the interesting things that he refers to in this letter, some of you might want to have a look at this, and hopefully it would be helpful. There is another version, a paperback, but it's, I think, not at the moment easy to get if you're in the States. So those of you who are in the States, you might have to connect with the Baha'i Books UK and pay the postage. So the easiest solution for most of you, I think, is to get the Kindle version. Right, so that's a slight digression. Now, so in what sense is Baha'u'lláh the return of Christ? Here, Baha'u'lláh wrote, "Lo, the Father is come, and that which you were promised in the kingdom is fulfilled." So he's saying this is his coming is the fulfillment of the promises of the New Testament of Jesus. And we get it again in his letter to Pope Pius IX. This is the Father foretold by Isaiah, and the Comforter concerning whom the Spirit, Jesus, had covenanted with you. So the Father and the Comforter. And Carolyn, could you read this little reference to Isaiah, which is what Baha'u'lláh is referring to?
"And the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace."
Right. Most of those of you who are from a Christian background will recognize this because it's usually read every Christmas in church. And it's very interesting because quite a lot of this can certainly be taken to concern the coming of Jesus. But Baha'is would say that there are quite a lot of prophecies, of which this is probably one of them, that refer more to the second coming than the first. Now, it would require going into more detail, but Jesus never called himself the Everlasting Father. And when it came to peace, he said, "I have not come to bring peace, but a sword." And that the peace that he was bringing was a spiritual peace in people's hearts and on into the next world. but he didn't come to bring peace on earth in a practical sense. So this could be one reason for thinking that it refers primarily to the distant vision of the return of Christ, well, distant at that time, in the glory of the Father. So let's have a look at one or two more of these quotes. Bahá'u'lláh clearly claims to be Christ returned in the glory of the Father. So there's the prophecy, for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father, coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And then we see Bahá'u'llah's statement, lo, the Father is come, and that which we were promised in the kingdom is fulfilled. And again, this is the Father foretold by Isaiah, and the Comforter concerning whom the Spirit Jesus hath covenanted with you, which we've seen that one, and so on. Right. Now, I wanted, how are we off for time? Right. I think it's worth taking a little bit of time to see what is this business of the Father? Because normally when you say our Father which art in heaven, we're talking about God. But I think it would be helpful to look at this parable of the vineyard. So many of you, if not all, are probably familiar with this, but just to summarize, the Lord of the vineyard needed to absent himself for a long period, and so he let it out to tenants. And then when the time came for him to collect his share of the harvest, he sent a servant to collect his dues. The tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Twice more he sent a servant, each of whom received the same treatment. And then said the Lord of the vineyard, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son. It may be that they will reverence him. But when the husbandmen saw him, they reasoned among themselves, saying, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, that the inheritance may be ours. And so they killed him. Now, quite clearly, to me, the Son is himself, is Jesus. And so he, in this story, is prophesying that he's going to be killed. He, the heir to the throne, so to speak, to the vineyard. At this point, Jesus concludes, what therefore shall the Lord of the vineyard do unto them? He shall come and destroy these husbandmen and give the vineyard to others. Now, so the Lord of the vineyard is the Father. And he's going to come and sort out these bad tenants and give the vineyard to others. So just to go quickly through this is all that's black is me. Clearly the vineyard represents the earth, the man who planted it, God, the husbandmen, the religious leaders, the servants dispatched and maltreated, the Old Testament prophets, just as Christ later lamented, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee. Equally clearly, the Son, the heir to the inheritance whom the tenants kill, refers to Jesus himself. So Jesus was already in no doubt about his future martyrdom. What is interesting for us, however, is that Christ's death is neither the end nor the climax of the story. The climax comes with the arrival of the Father, the Lord of the vineyard himself. Up to this time, the vineyard, the earth, has remained in a permanent state of rebellion. Not even the coming of the Son put an end to man's disobedience. When the Father returns, he evicts the bad tenants and installs new ones who will carry out his wishes. For this latter part of the parable would seem then to synchronize with the prophecies concerning the coming of the Lord of hosts and Christ's return in the glory of the Father at the time of the end. It marks at once the day of judgment and the time of the establishment of God's law on earth. Thy will be done on earth as in heaven. We can see from this how important it is to understand the significance of the coming of the Lord of the vineyard himself. So again, this is one way of approaching who is Bahá'u'lláh and in what way is he the Father. So while Christ came, I can't read this because it's hidden by the...
I'll read it. So
Yes,
while
please.
Christ came in the station of God's beloved Son, Bahá'u'llah's role is that of Christ's return, this time in the glory of the Father, symbolic of his task to bring all mankind together in one fold, one family, God's kingdom on earth.
Right. So really, these are suggestions as maybe fresh ways of looking at things which we may, and sayings and prophecies and teachings with which we may be familiar, but that this is a different tack. That which the Lord hath ordained as this is Bahá'u'lláh saying, that which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause, one common faith. This can in no wise be achieved except through the power of a skilled and all-powerful and inspired physician. And that was, interestingly enough, in his letter to Queen Victoria in the United Kingdom. Carolyn?
The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. The fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and to promote the unity of the human race and to foster the spirit of love and fellowship amongst men.
Soon, sorry, yeah, carry on.
Soon, Bahá'u'llah's own words proclaim it, will the present day order be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead. Verily, thy Lord speaketh the truth and is the knower of things unseen.
So, I mean, this is really relevant for us because we would say that what we're experiencing in the world at this particular moment in history is the rolling up of the old world order and the spreading out of a new world order in its stead. So at the moment, we're seeing mostly the rolling up of the old world order, but less noticeable is the spread and establishment of the beginnings of the new world order. So, to sum up, while Christ came in the station of God's beloved Son, Bahá'u'llah's role is that of Christ's return, this time in the glory of the Father, symbolic of his task to bring all mankind together in one fold, one family, God's kingdom on earth. Carolyn?
That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause, one common faith. This can in no wise be achieved except through the power of a skilled and all-powerful and inspired physician.
Right, so we've just repeated that quote, but it's worth repeating, I think. And we've had this one, so I'll just skip that for now. The process in which we are now living, Bahá'u'llah's own words proclaim. And here again, we've had this one, but can you read it again, Carolyn?
Soon will the present day order be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead. Verily, thy Lord speaketh the truth and is the knower of things unseen.
Right, so we're going to finish, because I want to leave plenty of time for discussion, with Baha'u'llah's little extracts. I mean, it's only partial, but giving an idea of Baha'u'llah's appeal to the Christians.
Open the doors of your hearts. He who is the Spirit, Jesus, verily standeth before them. Say, we in truth have opened unto you the gates of the kingdom. Will ye bar the doors of your houses in my face? He verily hath again come down from heaven, even as he came down from it the first time. We verily have come for your sakes, and have borne the misfortunes of the world for your salvation. Flee ye the one who hath sacrificed his life, that you may be quickened. Fear God, O followers of the Spirit, Jesus. Be fair in your judgment.
Right. So we can open this up now to questions or comments.
Great, thank you so much. So it was really interesting. And I'm glad you have books that people can read if they want to get more into depth with this. So thank you so much again. Yeah,
Can I just mention, sorry, can I just mention something else? Because as well as the commentary on Baha'u'llah's letter to the Christians, there is a sort of study circle material, a bit like Ruhi, which is covers a lot of other aspects of Christian, the Baha'i understanding of things Christian, and it's called the Omega course. You know, Alpha and Omega, so it's the Omega course. And at the moment, there's only one person in America who has experience of facilitating this. She may well be in the audience. I haven't had time to see. Carolyn in California. So if anybody was interested in having, in looking at that material, they would need to contact her. I know she's very busy helping with the conferences that are just coming up. Okay. So yes, sorry to interrupt.
Okay, great. Thanks for letting us know about that. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put it in the chat now. So starting off with a question from someone from an evangelical Christian. So he says, in your book, you said this about the resurrection of Jesus. In the light of these words, we may consider that what is most important is to believe that Christ has, since his passing, continued to exist spiritually and to be close to all those who turn to him. If we believe this, then the question of whether his resurrection was physical as well as spiritual may seem a relatively secondary matter. The purpose of these reflections, then, is not to deny the physical resurrection, for historically nothing can be proved either way, but to put the emphasis on the underlying spiritual reality at stake. So the question is, how can this be a secondary issue when Jesus asked the disciples to touch his physical body in Luke 24:39, which says this, "See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see me. Touch me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have."
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a perfectly reasonable question. I've only got a partial answer, is the answer to that. I mean, it seems to me that what is said at the beginning there, that that the most important thing is that Jesus continued to exist and to be close to his followers after his passing. And that was the important part of the message. And it seems to me that whether you're one of the people who thinks that it was actually a physical resurrection, or one of those people who think that it was that this is a spiritual reality, it doesn't change the fact that it's this closeness of Jesus to his believers that is vital, and the fact that in that sense he's certainly not dead. But just my own personal comment about the point that was being made there is that yes, that according to the story version that we have is true. It's a question of whether this was a normal physical encounter or whether it was a collective spiritual experience. After all, at the time, he had come into the room without opening the door, as far as we can gather. So it wasn't a normal, it's not usual for a body to be able to come into a room without opening the door. And we think of the other appearances, like when he met disciples on coming along the road and he talked to them and so on. They didn't recognize him. And this was just after he'd gone, just a matter of days. So, it's perfectly reasonable, I think, to assume that this was actually a spiritual experience that they were having. It's just my suggestion there, and I think that probably quite a lot of other people would say something similar. But we can't prove anything. But to me, what is the question to answer is, what is most important about these experiences? And the most important thing was that Christ had not died and disappeared and was no more, but that he was with people to support them and help them. But as I say, it seems to me that, right, if you feel that it's so precise in the New Testament that it has to be physical, that's fine. But today, for us, closeness to Jesus is not because we can see him bodily. It's because of an inner spiritual perception and feeling. So I don't know if that is entirely satisfactory to the person who's asked the question, but so I think I've answered the next question on the chat. Is the book Reflections on the Letter to the Christians available in actual book form rather than just Kindle? I agree with preferring an actual book. There is a little problem, as I say, at the moment, that it is not if you go to the Baha'i books in the States, it's not available at the moment. I'm hoping that something can be done about that. But as I say, it is available and you can get it either direct from where it was published on the Isle of Mauritius, who are the publishers, or from Baha'i Books UK in England. But right, so there is that possibility.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this question is, in the hidden words of Bahá'u'lláh, he says, "O Son of Man, O Son of Desire, O Son of Being." Jesus was known as the Son. So who is Baha'u'lláh referring to as the Son of Being?
Well, Jesus himself said that all those who believe in him are sons of God. So I think it's a, you know, and we know that we're told that man is made in the image of God. So I think this is a reference, personally, again, my understanding, this is a reference to the essentially spiritual nature of every human being. Now, whether that spiritual nature is fulfilled or not will depend on how they live their lives and lots of different things, which God understands much better than me. But yeah, I think that's what it is, that in a sense, we are sons of being. You know, it's our spiritual reality that's being referred to, it seems to me.
Thank you. Would you be able to comment on how the idea of sheep has taken on a pejorative meaning today, as someone who follows in another person or ideology blindly, compared to how it may have been understood previously in the time of Christ?
Yeah. Well, obviously, the image of a shepherd was a sort of benevolent figure who was there to guide and protect his flock. So, yeah, I don't think it's, to me, it seems quite clear that these sheep are not necessarily following blindly. I mean, there are people who do follow blindly, but it's certainly Bahá'u'lláh says it's very desirable that they understand, that we should understand what we believe and why we believe it, and not just follow blindly. So yeah.
Thank you. How do you explain that Jesus did not have a father if we believe in the harmony of science and religion?
I don't. I don't explain it, except that I think that, you know, the Jews had a very elevated idea of God. They didn't like to use the word God. They used various other words because God was so holy, it wasn't unapproachable. And I think Jesus was following in that tradition of referring to God as Father, Abba. And also, I think it was a very good image, because the Jewish society was a very paternalistic society. The father was very much the head of the family, and the family was to obey the father. And so it was an image that, comparing himself to God's son and God being the father, was an image that they would have understood very, very well, the perfect obedience of the son. It was actually against the law of Moses to disobey your father. So, you know, it was a strong business. The punishment for it, if it was applied today, would be pretty dramatic. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can give more of an answer than that. There was one thing that if we'd had more time, I would have talked about, and that is that what Baha'is call progressive revelation, you know, that God reveals himself from time to time. And gives teachings that are suited to the needs and receptivity of the people at the time that they appear. And that this is something that happens at different stages throughout mankind's history and will continue into the future. And it's just taking a look at, you know, people like Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. That is a sequence of divine messengers, and the way things develop. So it was just to say that this concept of progressive revelation, which then is expanded in the Baha'i teachings to include the other great faiths in the world, this idea of a sequence of messengers is already there in the Bible in that sense. And in fact, it goes further than Jesus, because he prophesies the second coming and so on. So it's not finished.
Where is the reference of Baha'u'llah's appeal that you shared?
I think you'll find it, yes, you'll find it in the letter of Baha'u'lláh to the Christians, the one that the book is the commentary on.
Great. I think someone also put it in the chat. So.
Right. Thank you. Yes. Just to mention, because I called it the letter to the Christians, and it's in Baha'is often refer to it as the tablet of the Christians. And I was wondering where this expression tablet comes from. And I think my theory, and if anybody's present has got a better one, I'd be delighted to hear it. But I think it's a reference to Moses when he went up in the mountain and the God's laws were revealed and inscribed on tablets of stone. And it's by calling them tablets, it's sort of emphasizing that this is revelation from God and not just his personal ideas. That's my take on it. But anyway, I thought for people in general, they're more likely to know what a letter is than a tablet. So I call it letter to the Christians by Baha'u'lláh.
Baha'is may understand the coming of the Son of Man to indicate the coming of Muhammad. There shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. So the rest of the quote goes on, but could you speak to this as, you know, Baha'u'lláh as the coming of the Father?
Right. Yeah, well, probably the only thing that I can usefully say is what I referred to from the Book of Certitude of Baha'u'lláh, in which he says that any manifestation of God can be considered as the return of the previous one, or of any of them. Because yes, that's what I was wanting to mention, that out of all the things that we looked at about Jesus saying, you know, to know me is to know the Father, and that I can't do anything except what my Father has told me to do, and so on. But then there's also another saying of his, which is very intriguing, when he said, before Abraham was, I am. And as far as I can understand it, this is to me, this corresponds to the concept of the Word made flesh. Because the Word of God was what created the universe, and created the world, created human beings and animals and all these things. We're told that it was the Word of God that said, be, and it is, sort of thing. And so in a sense, each manifestation of God who comes gives as much of that word of God as people can take. Because each one of them, I love Baha'u'llah's comparison with them as physicians, as doctors, who give a prescription and they, according to the state of the patient. And so all these societies have been at different stages of development. And so they've been given a slightly different prescription, but the fundamental spiritual reality in all of them is the same. So, yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. I think we'll end there. So thank you so much again to Jeremy for giving us your time and your expertise. And I have put the link to your books in our flyer, and also I'll put it in the video that we upload afterwards.
Thank you.
So thank you. So next week, our speaker will be Mr. James Eligio, and his topic will be the significance of humanity's spiritual maturity. So this will be again at noon Eastern time. And keep in mind, we'll be going to daylight savings time tomorrow, but it'll still be at noon Eastern time next week. And then we'll end today with another Baha'i song on this topic of the return of Christ.
Oh Lord, I'm your child. Oh Lord, I'm your child. I'm down here working in your vineyard. Can do nothing till you come. I believe, yes, I believe. Oh, that Jesus, he died for me. And with the coming of Bahá'u'lláh, all mankind will be set free. Oh Lord, I'm your child. Oh Lord, I'm your child. I'm down here working in your vineyard. Can't do nothing till you come. I believe, yes, I believe. Oh, that Muhammad, he died for me. And with the coming of Bahá'u'lláh, all mankind will be set free. Oh Lord, I'm your child. Oh Lord, I'm your child. I'm down here working in your vineyard. Can do nothing till you come. I believe, yes, I believe.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye.